Kuzangpo and warm welcome. Just recently, Bhutan hosted the Sustainable Finance for Tiger Landscapes Conference, a truly impactful global summit. One of the conservation leaders who graced the event with their presence was Mr. Carlos M. Rodriguez, the esteemed Chief Executive Officer of the Global Environment Facility, or better known as GEF. As we talk to Mr. Carlos today, we have the privilege of delving into GEF's important role into Bhutan's conservation efforts. We will explore the organization's past contributions and give insights into its future plans. Join us as we uncover how GEF is shaping the future of environmental conservation in Bhutan and beyond. So, Mr. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so honored to have you here, Mr. Carlos.
My pleasure.
Okay. Now, before we delve into other serious questions about GEF, we will ask about, something about you. Yesterday, when I was going through your bio on internet, I learned that you are the former Environment and Energy Minister in Costa Rica. So I also learned that during your 3 terms as a minister there, Costa Rica doubled the size of its forests, made its electric sector 100% clean and renewable, and consolidated a national park system that has positioned the Central American country as a prime ecotourism destination. That sounds like an impactful work that you did. Now, could you please share us how you were able to do that and what's the current status of it there?
Well, thank you so much. And what Costa Rica has done is little compared to what Bhutan is today, because as opposed to what Bhutan is today, which is a high forest, low deforestation nation, is a nation that is in peace with nature and has a green energy sector. Costa Rica, because of our development policies in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, created a system, particularly in the agricultural sector, where we destroy our forests, thinking that producing food for the exportation and food security was the right way for our economy and our people. And we found the hard way that destroying our forests and trying to develop agricultural activities was not good for the economy and for the people. And we were forced to restore the landscapes, bring the forest back. And this is part of the work I did. So I was the minister, but I was part of a political process. I was part of a national commitment to restore the landscapes, the hills, the valleys, because we lost the soils, we lost biodiversity, and we lost the water. And those elements were impacting our economy. So we found that there's a balance between productive activities, agriculture, livestock, and conservation. We lost many of our natural ecosystems. And I wish no other countries go through that process because it was very hard on us. And for me, Bhutan is an example of wisdom and vision. Unfortunately, in my country, which today is very similar to Bhutan because it's a carbon neutral, nature positive country, we learned the hard way. So I was just part of a process, and my contribution was, trying to set the right policies. But I will say that the whole country was committed to restore nature. And today, the restoration of nature has given us a lot of benefits. We got water once more. We got biodiversity helping us. Biodiversity underpin economic activities. You cannot have coffee, which is our main exportation crops, without pollination by wasps and bees. And we lost that. We lost productivity because there was no biodiversity. And we found that biodiversity is kind of the raw material for ecotourism. People like to travel and see nature, and more as we become more urbanized, people living in cities, we lose contact with nature. So we saw the possibility to offer nature as a way to attract people, and that generates a lot of money. So it has been, I would say, very interesting, very successful. You need a lot of consistency throughout governments, and you need to have aspiration and commitment to pursue these goals because it is complicated. And in Costa Rica, we got a strong democracy. Every 4 years, there's a new government. We don't have a parliamentarian system. And, different presidents and ministers come and go, and they continue to build on what the previous government has been doing. And I will say that that gives the political stability for the country to achieve these goals.
It's truly impactful to hear all these, and I can't really wait to go to Costa Rica one fine day and then visit the place. Right. So now, if you could also share us your visit to Bhutan today. What's the purpose, and then how did you find Bhutan?
Well, I got three objectives for my visit to Bhutan. One is because of this international conference on finance, sustainable finance for tiger conservation. Tigers as being the top predator. If you protect tigers, you're protecting a lot of other species and a lot of other ecosystems. And Bhutan and 15 other nations, which are what we call tiger range nations, countries where you still find tigers, committed in 2010 to stop the decline in the population of tigers. And many reasons are associated to that. Probably two are the main one. One is poaching because of the trade of parts of tigers, and the other is habitat loss. So since 2010, there has been a comprehensive approach from governments, from scientists, for organizations like the GEF. I mean, the GEF has been supporting governments in protecting tigers and tigers landscape for, I would say, 3 decades. We've been able to mobilize around $300 million in that period. And this conference, with the patronage of Her Majesty, aims to increase the actions around different landscapes to continue increasing the population of tigers. The population of tigers has decreased dramatically from 100,000 tigers 50 years ago to less than 3,000 tigers in 2010. And from 2010, countries has been able to double the size of the population, particularly in 3 nations, India, Nepal, and Bhutan. Some countries are still struggling with very small populations, which are very vulnerable to many different activities, but that is one of my objectives to come here. The second objective is to see the GEF projects in Bhutan. GEF has been financially supporting the government and the society in Bhutan in protecting nature. We've been doing many works for many years, and we have a portfolio of projects associated primarily to the protection of nature. So this is a great opportunity for me to go to the field and see the projects that the GEF is financing, because by doing that, we can learn much better how we can upscale and give the sustainability element of what we are doing. So being able to see the projects, to talk with the stakeholders, it is important. And the third objective is to talk with the government officials. I had the opportunity to talk with the king and the queen, which are enlightened people with a clear vision. I wish many global leaders had that commitment to the people by protecting nature, but also very importantly with the politicians, with the ministers of finance, environment, agriculture, energy, which are the key partners for us at the GEF. And it is an inspiration to be able to hear the wisdom and the political commitment of these political leaders. This also helps me to bring more resources and put them in use for the government so they can continue upscaling their efforts in terms of sustainability. I don't want Bhutan to go through the same process that my country, Costa Rica, went, because we had the wrong ideas for development. And yes, of course, Bhutan has always been an inspiration in terms of values and principles. And I need to learn a lot from this country. And this is my third objective, coming here and learn from the government, learn from the people, learn from Their Majesty in terms of the big challenges, because Bhutan may be doing very good, But at the global level, the impact of climate change and loss of biodiversity can be generate big impacts, even though you protect your forests. Climate change, and particularly the impact on water resources, may be very heavy on Bhutan.
Exactly. Now, Global Environment Facility, we have been talking about it a lot. I'm pretty sure a lot of people out there have heard about Global Environment Facility or GEF through BBS, but a lot of them must be eager to know what it really is. If you could say a little about
Well,
GEF.
I'm very grateful with BBS that has been, promoting the work that we do. The GEF is this multilateral fund. It's like a bank, but instead of giving loans, we give grants. And it is the product of an agreement of 187 countries. 30 years ago, 187 countries agree on providing funding to developing nations so they can implement actions that respond to the international environmental agreements. We got agreements on nature, we got agreements on the climate, we got international agreements on land restoration and on chemicals and pollutions. So the GEF is the financial mechanism that provides grant money to countries to implement those commitments. For example, Bhutan may have an issue of toxic pollutant coming from the industry, coming from the medicals, from hospitals, coming from regular waste, and we are the ones that provide strategic fundings so that management of that waste can be the right one. Bhutan has a commitment to electrify the transportation sector. So the GEF comes and does the investments to do the piloting, to do the research, to do investments in how do we go from fossil fuels into a green e-mobility scheme. And yes, of course, the GEF has been providing resources to Bhutan to create the system of protected areas, which is extremely important. And I believe that keeping a healthy system of protected areas will not only help the local economy by being more resilient to climate change and loss of biodiversity, but also gives Bhutan an opportunity to become a major tourist destination, which is something that I heard from the king, I heard from the prime minister. Big investments are being done in new airport, new agreements with airlines, which in a matter of a few years, Bhutan may become a major destination for ecotourism. And the GEF resources are available for the country to do those kinds of investments. So today, we have around 2,000 projects in 144 countries with a budget of around $8.4 billion. So we're a large organization. Still, the challenge for us, there's still many challenges, but I feel that we do progress as countries understand better how to better use the GEF resources.
Right. So I believe GEF started providing assistance to Bhutan starting 1992, 1 year after its launch in 1991. It provided assistance to Bhutan Trust Fund to start with. And then since then, you said one of your objectives to visit Bhutan was to see how the GEF projects are doing. So how do you think, from 1992 to now, how do you think the impact of your GEF's financing mechanism has really worked in Bhutan?
Well, that's a very good question. So because we use money from donors, the money is coming from the US, Canada, Europeans, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, developed nations. Since we use their resources and we are using the taxpayers' resources, we have all kinds of accountability and monitoring and reporting systems. So we constantly assess the impacts of the projects that we do. And as an average, around 90% of all the GEF projects, in between 80 to 90%, rank highly satisfactory. But when I see the portfolio of what we've been doing in Bhutan, the positive ranking goes very high, up to 95%. So that means that there is political consistency, there is human capacities, there are strong partnerships within the central government here in Bhutan and the implementing agencies. This can be UN agencies or international conservation organization. So we monitor and report and we assess the effectiveness of our policies and the effectiveness of the implementing agencies in Bhutan. And Bhutan always rank very, very high, which is quite satisfactory. So that is a good reason for me to come here and learn more on Bhutan, on why they do so good. So I can go to other nations, other countries, and bring the learned lessons out of Bhutan and try to implement similar approaches.
Right. So were you able to learn anything from here during those few days?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, there's something that we constantly underestimate, which is the vision, the long-term vision. Many countries, because of limitations, human limitations or political limitations, are unable to have clear the long-term vision. What do we want in 20, 40 years? And Bhutan is always very clear of what they want. Also, I see a lot of political consistency across agencies. So in many countries, the big political challenges are the different views within ministries of environment and ministries of energy. And in Bhutan, there is no conflict because you got energy and environment in the same agency, which is very clever. So these are the kinds of things I've been learning. But most importantly, has to do with ambition and aspiration from the political point of view. And I've been very impressed by what I have seen. And I hope that many other countries can do similar. Looking into the future, I think that we need to use Bhutan as a testing ground where we can bring politicians, private sector, and NGOs from other countries and see what Bhutan is doing here. So there can be South-South cooperation within nations. And this is something very important for the GEF.
Right. Now, Mr. Carlos, one of the main concerns, Bhutan graduated from LDC, and then one of the main concerns from a lot of Bhutanese was, international financial entities like GEF withdrawing their, financing from our country. So how do you think how will the GEF's involvement be in future, despite the fact that Bhutan graduated from LDC?
First, let me say that I'm super happy that Bhutan has done whatever they needed to do in order to not to be an LDC country, and that is great. But it brings challenges. For example, we used to provide to Bhutan a lot of money for climate adaptation because of their LDC condition. Now that they are not in LDC condition, we don't provide Bhutan with these specific climate adaptation funds, but there are other opportunities. As the GDP per capita grows, as the economy grows, Bhutan will have new sources of resources that can be available for them. But I believe that the big challenges in Bhutan, like many other developing countries, is not if they can afford or be subject to international cooperation. It's a matter of debt for development. And when I see the financial condition in Bhutan, I see that there's a big debt, foreign debt. So most of the savings that this country has goes to pay debt. So that is a big issue. So we got ideas on how do we solve two problems. One is protecting nature and dealing with debt. So debt swaps, using your debt as a way to mobilize more resources for nature conservation will be a very interesting option for Bhutan. So Costa Rica, my country, went through something similar. Costa Rica used to be the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere 100 years ago, and today Costa Rica's human development standards are higher than in many countries in the global north. And the fact that we were not subject anymore to traditional cooperation was not a limitation. And I think that Bhutan is learning that. I see a very clear tendency on economic growth. So that economic growth will eventually give the opportunities to Bhutan to mobilize financial resources that previously came as aid because of their LDC condition. So it is a process of change, and we need to see it on the positive side. I believe that once more, having such a big burden because of their international debt, give us the opportunity to negotiate that debt and do a swap kind of to nature conservation. I think that the conservation trust funds in Bhutan has the human and financial conditions to participate in these debt swaps. So the debt relief process by using resources and channeling to nature may be a very good option looking into the future. The other potential new source of finance to Bhutan may be the carbon credits coming from the forest sector. We're still far from having a global system that really compensates countries for the positive benefit of keeping your forest. Bhutan has a lot of forests, is carbon neutral, but nobody pays them for that. So one of the reasons of my visit, and I had a very interesting conversation with your prime minister about bringing together nations which are what we call high forest, low deforestation nations. These countries are giving a global service, a global benefit by keeping these carbon stocks and contributing to climate mitigation. But these countries are not being properly compensated, financially speaking, for that service. So we need to create a group of countries that becomes a major political force, so the price of carbon and the expansion of the carbon market can be a good new additional source of finance for Bhutan and many other countries.
Right, right. Now, going forward, because electric vehicle, for example, in Bhutan as of now is very popular when it comes to GEFs financing. Now, going forward, how does GEF plan to involve itself with Bhutan?
Well, the Prime Minister told us that for him and for the government, it is a high priority to invest in e-mobility. And e-mobility is not just moving towards electric vehicles, it is a new paradigm of mobility, whereby public transportation may be a good way to decarbonize. I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister drives an electric car. How many Prime Ministers in the world drive an electric car? I will say less than 10. So that shows us the commitment. In order to really electrify the transportation sector, you need to do a lot of early investments in piloting, in demonstrating the new technologies, and bringing all sectors around it. And yes, of course, in helping make the cost of the purchase of these buses or particular cars something that can be affordable, because the technology is still very expensive. Yes, there is a benefit by the fact that you don't need to purchase fossil fuels, which are becoming every day more expensive, and that down the line will be the savings. But I think that Bhutan has a very clear commitment in going into e-mobility, and the GEF today is the number one source of finance grant money for e-mobility.
So, Mr. Carlos, now before we end this conversation, do you want to say anything about your visit here in Bhutan, or about GEF, or about Bhutan's conservation efforts, anything?
Yes, of course. As I previously said, coming to Bhutan has been something that I had in my priorities for many years, because when I was a minister in the late 1990s, Costa Rica and Bhutan began to collaborate and cooperate within themselves. These are two countries that didn't have diplomatic relationship, didn't have trade relationship, but we share a lot of things. And we felt that through the help of the GEF and other nations, we were able to begin exchanging experiences. So based on the fact that I was back in the 1990s helping in this South-South cooperation, I always had a personal interest to visit the country. And yes, of course, visiting the country for me has been extremely positive from the intellectual, spiritual point of view, which is very important, because this country, as opposed to many countries, do have very clear that what they want to do at the end of the day. So having a country that is very consistent in principles and values is an inspiration. And this does help me in my work in countries which are in conflict, countries which are coming from a conflict, an armed conflict, countries which are struggling in terms of human development, countries that has been highly impacted by climate change. I mean, the forest in Bhutan has become a safety net to them. But many countries who lost their forests are now feeling the high impacts of climate change. And this has become a very serious matter. So coming here helps me understand much better the things that the GEF should be doing in other countries so they can catch up with what Bhutan is doing right now.
Mr. Carlos, so this is the end. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I truly hope that GEF's contribution to Bhutan and beyond gives us a wonderful world that we envision for ourselves and our children.
Thank you so much.